Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here this morning. We're happy to have you here, happy to host this. I thank Mrs. Gibbons for organizing this today. As you can see, we have many representatives here that will be speaking to you today. I know I'm using the mic, but they're asking me to use it to record. It's more of an intimate setting. But today we're here to, for those of you who don't know me, I'm John Borman, the superintendent here in the Rumson School District. I've been here for going on 11 years, believe it or not. And in that time, I've had the fortune of amassing a fantastic team over here, some of who were here when I arrived and helped guide me, some of who have been added to the team and have elevated the services we provide here in the district for our students. And today we're going to be talking about those services. You know, I'm sure all of you are aware our mission statement is to ignite the potential of our students. We recognize that that mission is individualized to every student. It depends on where they're starting as individuals, what their needs are. It is not a generic formula to get them there. And today you're going to hear under what we call the MTSS. Education has lots of acronyms, but it is the multi-tiered system of supports that we utilize here in the district, and it starts well before a student is determined to have a need for a program that is specialized based on a disability. It begins really with any red flag that comes up. If we can go to the next slide, please. And that flag falls under an umbrella of three key things. It could be an academic red flag that is triggered by test scores, that's triggered by observations we see in the classroom based on teachers, work with students. It could be a behavioral pattern that we're seeing with the student, and it could be more of a social emotional need. Their anxiety-based interactions with other individuals. It could be a self-confidence piece that they are dealing with. The point of this MTSS system is not to wait until there is a diagnosis, if you will, if there is a reactive need to support students. It's meant to be highly proactive in its avenue. And so you're going to hear details about this over the course of today. I am very proud of this system that's been created. In the first slide, you saw a question there about why ours is unique. It's unique because it is based on absolute best practices that have taken 10 years and the work of these amazing individuals over here to ensure that we have the ability to flag, whether it's coming from you as parents or something we see internally within the district, to flag a need in a student and begin to address it through several processes that ultimately arrive in the first step, which is an intervention and referral services plan that you're going to hear more about today. So today is a lot of information, and it is really the story of a journey of a student who is demonstrating the need for a little extra push and how we as a district have formulated that plan to get us there. At the end of today, you're going to hear back from me about how, whether or not with the state of education and politics, if you will, is this threatened, and to what degree is it threatened? And hopefully I can put you at great ease with that conversation at the end. But I kind of want you to hear what that perfect system is that has been created by this amazing staff. So thank you and enjoy.
Thanks, Dr. Borman. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for spending some time with us this morning. My name is Vera Radu. I'm the supervisor of curriculum instruction, assessment, intervention services, and whatever else that guy wants to throw on my label. So no, really, it really is a pleasure to be here. And I do want to give a shout out to Mrs. Gibbons and Ms. Flynn and the team here. They put this presentation together. It's beautiful. I could never make it as beautiful in Google Slides. So I really want to thank all of you for putting this together. It's super informative. For those of you who have friends who can't be here today, we are recording it, and we are going to be posting it on the curriculum tab under narrated presentations and screencasts. So hopefully by the end of the day, you'll be able to bore yourself to death yet again and watch it at your leisure. So, all right, so Dr. Borman did a great job talking about that umbrella of MTSS. And INRS, Intervention and Referral Services, is really that foundation of the MTSS process. So why do we have to have it? Because the state tells us to, but I would venture to say, even if the state didn't tell us that we needed to have an Intervention and Referral Services program and MTSS, we would do it anyway, because we are truly dedicated to making sure every student achieves their potential. So INRS brings together a team of professionals within the school system to meet on behalf of a student. The general teacher, it's a general education initiative. The general education teacher reaches out to our counselors to say, hey, you know, I'm noticing something's going on with Mary, and I'd like to maybe pull together a team to talk about some different strategies that we can use to move Mary along in a certain area. It's a structured approach. We meet initially as a pre-team to see, okay, let's try a few things, collect some data to see if we need to move into that next step and bring a larger team together to discuss student goals and progress. It's super collaborative. We learn a lot from each other when we sit together and talk about student performance, and we look at the data and we pull strategies from these experts around the table. We also make sure that whatever stage in the INRS process we are in, we're monitoring whether or not the interventions are working, and that's called progress monitoring that we're going to get into a little bit as we move further along in the presentation. So how do we begin to understand our students as learners? Well, it starts in kindergarten. Dr. Borman's here 11 years. 11 years ago, we were pretty much a data poor district. We are data rich. We're practically billionaires right now because we have so many data systems that we are able to use in order to pinpoint exactly where students might be experiencing that difficulty. It starts in kindergarten. Before our littlest learners come in June, we bring all of them in and we administer something called the Dial 4 assessment. It's a screen. It's not a readiness test. It kind of just monitors how students are performing in different areas, speech and language, some basic concepts, gross motor, fine motor skills. The kids don't even know that they're being assessed. It's kind of like a playtime. So that's really how we begin to understand who our Rumson students are. Once those students have that screen, when they come in as kindergartners, we are able to identify what students we need to dig a little bit deeper, okay, based on that screen. And we administer something called AIMSweb, which allows for us to really pinpoint some of the areas that we might need to reinforce and support. AIMSweb is pretty much the gold standard for measuring student progress, and your students who have IEPs, AIMSweb is one of the deciding metrics that we're using to measure progress along those IEP goals. So it's a super important metric that we use. We also, the state, some of you may or may not be aware, we are required to screen all of our children to see if they may or may not have a learning disability in the area of reading, such as dyslexia. And our interventionists lead that effort at the K2 level, using AIMSweb and using Sally Shaywitz's screener. If you're familiar with dyslexia, she is one of the leading researchers in that area. And she has partnered with AIMSweb to provide for a more anecdotal screen that identifies the level of risk that a student might be experiencing. So that's kindergarten, that's K1-2. We have so many other metrics that we use. We have IXL, growth measure, you know, along the continuum K through 8. And all of those, I invite you to go to that narrated screencast tab because we do have presentations that explain all of those metrics that we use. Intervention and referral services, we talked a little bit about the protocol, who those people are, And there is also a component under that umbrella, the social emotional learning team, which those individuals are sitting right over there. When we say the state says you have to have INRS, you need to look at MTSS, I don't know if there's any district, and I'm not just saying this because I work here, there's not a district that I'm aware of that does it as well as that team over here. We've pretty much become that model for the county, so we should be very proud of that and proud of the support that you provide. It goes above and beyond what the state mandates. Okay, so the MTSS model, I'm sure you've seen this pyramid before, tiered intervention, tiered instruction. So if we look at the 3 tiers here, all of our kids receive tier 1 instruction. That's that good high quality instruction that they get in homeroom. And universal types of interventions are used for all of our kids. It's that core curriculum that all of the kids follow. There's differentiation that occurs. There's a win period that teachers use to work with students in that tier 1 instructional atmosphere. But sometimes data might indicate that we need a little bit more support. And tier 2 involves our intervention team. Some of you might be familiar with our reading and writing specialists and our math coaches here. We're very proud of that program. It has evolved into something, and I keep saying a model. It truly is a model for early intervention in the area, especially in the area of reading, and we're building our math intervention programs. Sometimes the data might indicate that tier 1 and tier 2 interventions aren't enough, and we need to kick it up a notch to a tier 3. What that could look like for a child is they're getting that tier 1, continuing to get that tier 1 with the general education population, and then tier 2, maybe they're receiving intervention with an interventionist in a pull-out setting. But we're noticing those tiers aren't enough, and we need maybe one-on-one or 2 students to 1 teacher on a very, very specific goal that we're going to measure over the course of 6 weeks to see if the data proves to us that the intervention is working. And if it's not, there is a system in place that we then go to say, hey, we've provided all of this great instruction, we've moved through the tiers, we're providing tier 3, which is the highest level within our intervention program. We then would consult with CST to see, is there anything that we need to do to dig a little bit deeper to see if the student might have a learning disability. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Gibbons, principal at Forestdale.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I think the first class I took as an undergraduate studying education, they told us that it's not always about academics, and that until a child's basic needs are met, we cannot advance their learning, and we may not see growth. With that, that's certainly evolved over the years as I've grown as an educator, but most recently what we see is social emotional learning becoming at the forefront of what students need first before they can learn and grow. With that being said, prior to the pandemic, our district had an initiative to begin a social emotional learning team, which started very basically with administrators as well as school counselors and has grown to include additional personnel, all of whom will present throughout today and you will get to meet. Within our MTSS umbrella, social emotional learning has its own tiers of intervention, starting much like our academic friends, and Mrs. Radu mentioned, starting with our universal screening process for our students in grades 3 through 8. Students take a survey in the fall. It's the SSIS survey. It is research-based, and it asks students questions about how they feel about themselves, how they feel about school, and gives us very important data that we are able to get a temperature check on all of our students related to their social emotional learning needs. This is in addition to conversations that we're constantly having with teachers in the classroom with our students. From there, our SSIS survey is based on the CASAL standards, which is the Collaborative for Academic and Social Emotional Learning. The survey then aligns to these standards, which then drives our classroom instruction in character education and mindfulness. That is a Tier 1 intervention that all students receive in our school district. So both Mrs. Benny, as our mindfulness teacher, partners with our character education instructors, who are our school counselors, in delivering lessons based upon our mandatory state standards through the New Jersey Bar Association related to harassment, intimidation, and bullying. But beyond, we're looking at themes that we draw from different grade levels or groups of students from that initial survey that we do. We also have input from parents, as well as our team in regards to what they're hearing on the playground or in the lunchroom, or what we're hearing are hot topics amongst our students. As you can imagine, at the middle school level, that's ever changing. I wish I could keep up with what our middle school hot topics are. I thank Urban Dictionary for that. But we like to base our lessons on what our students' needs are from the whole group, Tier 1. We also have trained our staff on equity, which goes beyond in Rumson what we think about equity. A great deal of what we talk about is about our special education students, wanting to ensure that they're included in the classroom, wanting to train our teachers on how to do things like hand out a study guide that might be part of a student's IEP, abandoning practices such as the following students stay after and get your study guide, and building it into a tool for all that all would benefit from, but also a more personalized and covert approach, especially in those formative middle school years where socialization and peers become at the forefront of anything a student thinks about in that classroom. We've also trained our staff on metacognition, asking students questions, having them elicit their own thinking, utilizing resources they have to find the answers. I was a math teacher in the beginning of my career, and if I could go back, I would put my pencil down or my whiteboard marker down and ask questions that made the student pick theirs up. And that's a shift in education because of all the research that we've done in metacognition. And then lastly, social emotional learning. Our students are really being versed in the zones of regulation, having them understand what it feels like physically in their body, but also what it feels like in their heart when they maybe have a big emotion. We, our guidance counselors, do a tremendous job in teaching the students about this. And then our classroom teachers have developed appropriate classroom communities that utilize these zones of regulation to help students check in, own their feelings, and use tools and coping strategies that will help them self-regulate. We hear that buzzword, executive functioning. How many of you have heard that, right? As special education parents. Executive functioning is not just I use my planner and I organize my binders by color-coded tabs. Executive functioning is understanding how I'm feeling and the tools and strategies I have to manage those feelings so that I can be a productive citizen in my school, in my classroom, and I can own my learning. And that's really hard to teach. So kudos to all of you at home who help us with that and maybe utilize the zones of regulation. I know I use it with my own daughter, who is a 4th grader and seems very dramatic of recent. But our teachers are doing that on a day-to-day basis. Back when the student who was crying was automatically sent to the guidance counselor, we see self-regulation stations in classrooms. We have start-over zones. We have students who know how to put on their earbuds and pick their music that helps them regulate their senses. And that's for everyone within Tier 1. We move forward to our Tier 2 interventions, and we're getting that data from our SSIS survey. We're also asking teachers for input as well as parents related to students who might need to be included in social skills groups. We have started a mindful art group here at the middle school. They seem to love Lunch Bunch with Miss Piernick over at Deanport, which would be a Tier 2 intervention. But suddenly, if you want to invite 6th grade boys to Lunch Bunch, the drive decreases to go. But if you want to go doodle with Mr. Miranda on a cold day of recess, it all of a sudden becomes more desirable. And now you're in this special enrichment club that you get to do extra art with Mr. Miranda, and he weaves in different models of counseling through that social skills group that we call MAPS. Of course, it's an acronym. We have self-regulation stations throughout the building that students can access. We'll talk a little bit more about that because our OT, Steph Valdenon, is highly involved in creating those Tier 2 supports for students, sensory paths, etc. Finally, we have for our Tier 3 supports, which might include one-on-one counseling, which I'm sure many of you might have written into your IEP. We have students in INRS and 504 who likewise have one-on-one counseling built into their support plans. We also have students who are maybe struggling with social emotional needs and are returning from community agencies and need one-on-one support to transition back to the school environment. And they too would be one of our Tier 3 students included in that more individualized support for social emotional learning. We also, on occasion, will ask our OT and our behaviorists to conduct consultations in the classroom where they're observing the students through something like our BASC or our SOS observational tool collecting data, and provide our teacher with environmental designs that would potentially be good for the whole classroom, back to that Tier 1 idea, but also very good for a student who may be struggling social emotionally. So something, for instance, it might be a specific type of chair that the student uses on the carpet because the OT staff noticed that they had poor posture and were slouching, and that impacted their behavior. So these are different support staff and experts that we have to really make sure we're supporting our students as individuals as well as whole groups. I'd like to take a moment and just introduce the people who are so important to our students' social emotional learning. They're up front with us. We have at Dean Porter, Jess Piernick, our school counselor, K3, just back from her maternity leave. We have Allie Kottman, our 3-5 character ed teacher, but 4-5 counselor. And then lastly, we have Ms. Fahey, our 6-8 counselor, who also does grade 5 character education. All right. Dr. Snyder, as you all know, is the director of guidance. I've had the fortune of getting to work intricately with these ladies in his little absence. I know the CPAG has been aware and supportive of him, and he sends his regards, but it's been a dream working with these ladies, as I do as a principal every single day anyhow. They are my right-hand women. All right. Going to turn this back over to our illustrious director of curriculum here.
Did you hear that, Dr. Borman, director? Okay, thank you. All right. So we did touch on this briefly earlier in the presentation. This is kind of the process for our INRS program. So early intervention, we talked a little bit about our youngest learners with the Dial 4, some of those kids who are flagged during that screening. We offer some summer programming free of charge to parents to kind of give them that boost, that jump start as they enter in September as kindergartners. So we're really looking for K-8 early intervention and looking at all of our data to drive all the decisions that we're making to look at different tiers of services. Maybe we need to intervene at that Tier 3 level to move this student along. Again, we talked a little bit about how it's collaborative. We bring in the grade level teacher, we bring in an interventionist, we have the guidance counselor there. Many times the building principal is there because she has had some good information in working with students throughout the day. We can pull in some of our specialists that are seated to your right, if necessary, to provide that collaborative team effort and pull on the greatest minds in our building to make sure that we are developing goals and putting interventions in place that will actually move the needle for students in a positive way. Action plans are developed where all the goals discussed are put down in writing and how those goals are going to be monitored. And our counselors make sure that our teachers are progress monitoring weekly, that information is shared with all of us to make sure that we're all kept abreast of how students are performing. And also it's a way for us to evaluate, again, whether or not we need to kick the tier up. We need to provide more intervention, maybe in a smaller group. And parents are valuable partners in that process. You know your kids the best. We get them for several hours, but you're living 24/7 with them. So if a parent gets an invitation to participate in an intervention and referral services meeting, it's really for you to be there to provide that at home. What's happening at home? Is there anything going on family-wise, sibling-wise, friend-wise? And it's also a way for you to support what we're doing here. Parents are not required to be at the INRS meeting, but we love to have you come in, whether it's virtually, in person, via phone, whatever mode is most comfortable for our parents. Next slide. Jan? That's okay. No worries. That's all right. Awkward silence. Okay. All right, so we're going to talk briefly about 504 plans. So 504, Section 504 plans falls under the Civil Rights Act, and 504 plans are available to students and to adults within the building. 504 plans are developed for individuals when they have a physical or a mental impairment that substantially limits a major life activity. So what is our major life activity in school? Learning, right? So for those students that have a disability who do not qualify for special education, but there are still a substantial impact in the classroom due to that disability, we have a team of people that meet, the 504 team, to discuss based on the student's performance as compared to an average student in the same grade level and age, is there a substantial impact? And that's a really important discussion to have. A student maybe have a diagnosis of ADHD, but they've developed some what they call compensatory strategies, right, to make learning accessible for themselves. Just because a student has a diagnosis doesn't mean that they qualify for a 504. It has to have that substantial classroom impact. So the team gets together. You are absolutely a part of this team. We can't develop this without you there. And we talk about that impact. What's happening? Is the student in intervention already? What is the teacher doing in the classroom? Based on how the student is performing, and the law states without mitigating measures, so whether they're on medication or not, a student could be medicated with ADHD and able to function, but without that medication, the student is not able to function. We look to the 504. Okay, and we're looking for accommodations that kind of just level the playing field. All right, we're not modifying curriculum. We're just looking for things that will allow for that student to have those barriers removed so that they can perform commensurate with their same age and grade level peers. Okay, and some people are like, well, what do those accommodations look like? It's completely individualized to each student. Some of the more common ones, if I were really pressed to say what are some of those accommodations like, some preferential seating, which can mean different things. It could be I need to be in front of the teacher, or I need to be in the back, away from the door, away from noise. It's completely individualized. And that's what's decided at that 504 meeting. We need your approval to implement that 504 plan. Again, you are required to be part of that team meeting. And I think I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Gibbons again to talk about, oh, yep.
An example of the district constantly moving forward with best practices is actually happening tomorrow.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes. Sorry, Jen.
No.
Stealing your thunder. All right. Tomorrow we have an expert in the state, John Comegno. I don't know if anyone is familiar with him. He is an attorney in the state of New Jersey who is an expert in 504 law, and special education services, and he's meeting with our team over here, as well as about 50 other administrators, counselors in the county are going to be coming into district to learn about 504 law, how to develop it, how to host those meetings, how to determine that substantial impact, because that's something that we kind of get hung up on, right? So we're really excited to have him come in. He's a dynamic speaker, and we're just really lucky to have him tomorrow, work with our teams. Now it's your turn.
Much of the remaining presentation will be conducted by our child study team and related services staff. So I just want to take the opportunity to introduce each of them as they come forward and share with you their part of this presentation. We obviously have at the helm Dr. Snyder, followed by his assistant Laura Randazzo, who's joined us in the back. I'm sure many of you receive emails, phone calls, and thus from her as you're scheduling meetings and have questions. We have Spencer Austin, our school psychologist. We have Sarah Connolly, our social worker. Sandy Self, our LDTC, who's currently testing a student. We have Jamie Caruso, our speech language pathologist. Teamed up with her is Dr. Glacken and Corinne Brennan. We also have Steph, who unfortunately all three of her kids have fallen ill, so we will be pinch hitting for her. But Steph is our OT. I always butcher her name. Sibel, thank you. Sibel is our physical therapist, and Duri Leidner is our behaviorist, who's with us in the back. All right, I'm going to pass it over to the child study team.
Hi, good morning, everyone. So in education in general, there's a lot of terminology and a lot of acronyms, and then you get into special education, and it quadruples. So we had this sheet for you guys when you first walked in. Don't worry, I'm not going to read every single one to you. But we also on our website under Parent Resources and Special Education have a list kind of more specific to Rumson. But in general, you're going to hear CST, so our child study team. That's me, Spencer Austin, Sandy Self, and Dr. Glacken for pre-K. IEP, that individualized education plan, ESY, so our extended school year program for those students that's qualified for. So there's a whole list. I think the best tip I can give you is that if you're in a meeting, you're having a conversation with anyone, and they say something and you're like, I don't know what that is, just ask, because there's so much, we don't expect you to know it all. So how does a referral end up to the child study team? So there's a couple different ways this can happen. A parent can always put in a written request. Typically, I think a lot of times that stems from outside evaluations where that provider may recommend a consultation with the child study team. But the most common way that a referral gets to us is by our INRS committee. So that's the intervention and resources that they were providing maybe isn't having the impact that they hoped. So our lovely guidance team will then come meet with our child study team, provide a formal referral, and kind of go through what services were provided, what interventions were provided, and why that wasn't supporting this student. It'll then come to us, and that is when that triggers our initial meeting with the parent, with the teachers, and with the child study team. Mr. Austin is going to come up next and kind of explain what happens when that initial meeting happens and what that triggers.
Hey everybody. So there's a lot that occurs within 90 days. And it sounds like a lot, and you're like, 3 months. We certainly do not try to take 90 days. It's really just a safeguard for us to say, okay, here's some parameters of what we need you to work within. That being said, within those 90 days, you have everything from, let's start with the 20 days. So let's say a referral comes in through INRS, through parent. Within 20 days, we must, by code and law, meet with the family and talk about next steps. In some cases, we may say, yes, evaluation is absolutely warranted. In some cases, we may say, ooh, we missed something. We really want to go back to, let's say, partner with the INRS committee and revisit, do another cycle of intervention, and continue that partnership first. But either way, regardless, we're going to have that meeting within 20 days. Let's take a scenario where we've decided as a team that we are going to move forward with child study team evaluation. At the point at which parent signs, and we do need consent in order to move forward, at the point at which you sign, a lot of things need to happen within 90 days. We must evaluate the student, and that can run a gamut of, your typical assessments like a psychological which would be like a cognitive assessment and/or looking at social emotional variables, and an educational evaluation, oftentimes a social work evaluation, which would include observation in a classroom, conversations with the parent about milestones and all of the above, and then it branches out into the others, the OT, the speech, the PT, the behaviorist, all of those others. So we're making all those determinations. All those evaluations have to occur. Reports written, provided to parents. Within 10 days from when reports are provided to parents, we then need to sit down as a team, review all of them together, determine next steps in planning, and then in the case that an IEP is indicated, develop that IEP within 90 days. So that's kind of the main goal. The other thing that is important to recognize is that whatever we are doing within the context of the MTSS support system is occurring at the same time, parallel with whatever we're doing as a child study team. Because a lot of times it's like, well, that's a long time. What's going to happen in the meantime? What's going to happen in the meantime is we're going to continue to provide those supports that we're providing along that continuum, and in addition, be investigating. Well, that's fine. You can go to the next one. But the only thing I missed there was that once an IEP is developed, every year, so you must have an annual review by code. It doesn't mean that that's the only time you can meet. It just means that we must once a year sit down and talk about that IEP, but we can always talk about it more frequently if we need to. And every 3 years, we must, by code, sit down and talk about whether any additional evaluations are indicated or updates to any of the information that we have. And then it's okay, let's say an IEP is indicated, what does that mean now in terms of programming? And it can mean a lot of different things. And one of the biggest distinctions between, let's say, a 504 plan and an IEP is truly programming. The need for individualized instruction for that child is really a main kind of litmus test for when is this indicated. That frequently will look like in-class resource, what we call ICR, meaning a two-teacher model, meaning we're in the general education population, we're alongside peers, but there are two teachers, one being a special ed teacher who's highly qualified in whatever areas we're talking about, and who can provide that support. What that looks like is very creative and can vary and should vary within the classroom, meaning sometimes they're doing stations, sometimes they're team teaching, sometimes they're both teaching, parallel teaching with groups. Sometimes one is teaching and one's moving around supporting. Sometimes one's teaching and one's doing observations and collecting data. Sometimes there's small groups pulled. What I think we've become, and having been in so many of these classes over time, we've become very good at making it not so apparent who gets supports and who doesn't get supports. And, I'm sure the special ed teachers sometimes are like, oh, I wish that, Bobby, who doesn't have an IEP, would stop asking me 50 questions. But the truth is, that is by design what it's supposed to be. And it's supposed to be comfortable that way. And I think that's what helps to make our students who do require some degree of supports feel more comfortable. That there's an old saying, what's so special about special education? Good teaching is good teaching, so that is what it is meant to be. Pull-out resource would be, okay, we really do need to provide some degree of, let's say, modification to the curriculum. We may really need to, even more so than in the gen ed class, look at multimodal provision of instruction, meaning I really have to hit it from a visual angle as well as auditory as well as kinesthetic, and I really need to, maybe some environmental changes need to occur, much more intensive sorts of individualized instruction that would go on in the pull-out resource. At present, because learning disabilities, generally, you don't have a learning disability in science. You don't have a learning disability in social studies. You have a learning disability in reading, writing, math. So the resource rooms typically here at the elementary and middle school level are in ELA and math. Then they're self-contained. Self-contained would be even further along a continuum of what we call least restrictive environment. We're always looking to the greatest extent to be with mainstream and with typically developing peers, but there are circumstances where, let's say a child had multiple disabilities and really needs occupational therapy, speech, physical therapy to be integrated into their day and not just pulled out for 20 minutes or 40 minutes. Conceptually, the self-contained classroom really offers you that ability to go beyond, to go cross-curricular and not just, now it's time for math, ding, now it's time for science, now it's time for, but to really be integrating those across what you're teaching in the classroom, but also to push in. We had Sandy, who's not here, used to run one of our self-contained programs back when I started 16 years ago. And it was very, very cool what we were able to do in there and push in and do all kinds of, we were doing cooking and we were learning math by cooking and we were doing this and we were doing, and it really becomes a special, very highly specialized program. And then, the supported classes, once we're talking about students changing classes, ELA, Math, Science, and Social Studies are our core. Then we have our related services, which is, again, your STEM, your art, your music, your gym, your foreign language, all fall under that. All staff members have and are obligated to have access to and understand children's IEPs. So that's one of the reasons why we start in this district early. Before kids come into the building, we have multiple days of in-service in the summer before everybody rolls into town. And we go over all those IEPs, and we go over all those 504 plans and INRS plans and make sure everybody understands. We also, in this district, is very good at developing professional learning communities so that there's time allocated during the week for the specials team to get together, for the 7th grade team to get together. And then what will often happen is they'll invite us and say, hey, can we talk about Bobby, or can we talk about this, and then we'll push into those professional learning communities so it's collaborative in that way, and we often do that with specials. And then I kind of, spoke to all of the different, components, the speech language, occupational and physical therapy, your fine and gross motor skills, your counseling supports, your behavioral supports, assistive technology when that's indicated, and we've come a long way with that too, with things like Co-Writer or, word prediction software, or, being able to, and even, to be honest, Google in and of itself has, text-to-speech embedded and all of these things embedded, so it's becoming less about individual software packages that we're purchasing and more about what the technology is providing, which is good, which is a good thing. And assistive tech, you going to talk? Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Hello. I've met some of you in our child study team meetings. I'm Corinne Brennan, and I primarily function as the speech language specialist in Forestdale, and I also wear another hat that I've recently inherited, which is I am an in-class resource teacher that supports science in 4th and 5th grade. And being here this morning and looking at this comprehensive view of the support system, I can't tell you how often I've seen this all come together when it's needed the most outside of one-on-one sort of setting, when the students are there really trying to apply those skills with information they've never seen before, trying to learn about their world in science. So I want to tell you that it is used and supported, and it's a wonderful thing that the staff is also so aware of all those support systems. So assistive technology, one of the most important one of the most important aspects of belief that we have as speech language therapists is that we believe that every individual needs to have the opportunity to be able to find a communication system that they can use to support communication for themselves so that they can stay connected to their world, so that they can express themselves. So assistive technology is a broad-based term for any device or system that helps people with disabilities and supports communication. So communication really has two parts, as you probably are aware. You have the part of communication where you receive information, and the part where you can express what you've learned and know about that communication, what you've heard. And so AT is really a way to look at different tools that help support both ends of that communication spectrum. So for the receiving part of communication, we include supports like the FM system, which is located in the classroom to aid students with hearing impairments. or apps like Co-Writer and text-to-speech. For the expression part of communication, students can use speech-generating devices, which are like tablets, which can speak for the student. So the student has a tablet with icons on it with pictures, and they can press those buttons, and those can, they have recorded messages that can speak and help the students learn vocabulary. But most importantly, it gives the students access to be able to communicate in a way that they cannot. Communicate to their parents, communicate with their teachers, and with their peers. We also have one of the subcategories of assistive technology is what we call AAC, or Augmentative Alternative Communication. So this is a specific type of assistive technology focusing solely on helping our students with communication impairments. AAC includes a variety of devices and methods like sign language, picture boards, communication books, and the tablets that I just mentioned that help kids communicate through building vocabulary. So within the MTSS model, parents are part of that whole process, and typically they would come in for parent training for whatever communication system that their student is being trained to use, and they observe the SLP working with their children or their child, and they also get an experience to be able to watch their child also use that device. And really the important thing is so that parents feel comfortable knowing that their child can take that device and use it outside of the classroom to stay connected in their daily life outside of the environment of school. And that's always a positive for our parents. So next slide. Okay. The fun part, our job, or the meat and potatoes of a speech-language pathologist is the articulation and language therapy. So a fun fact, in the very early days of school-based speech-language therapy, we were called speech correctionists. And I won't tell you how long ago that was for me, but primarily I would walk into a school and they would say, well, what do you hear? Oh, that's what you do. And they didn't know what we did, and we were tasked primarily to be able to work on focusing on the correction of speech production. But our field has changed dramatically over the many years that we've been involved in schools and also in hospitals in the medical world. And this slide really is an overview of how speech-language therapy is an integration of all forms of communication, both spoken words and how those words are processed. So articulation obviously refers to oral communication, the sharing of ideas by speaking them in such ways that others can really understand you. Articulation therapy includes training children how our articulators are integrated to form speech sounds. So if you ask kids, well, how do we make sound? They're going to, 99% of them, they're going to say, well, of course it's the mouth. And then what we do is we say surprise, and we find we are journeying into the mouth, and we are helping them understand that it's not just the mouth, but it's our lips, our tongue, our teeth, and even our breath support. Good articulation includes all of those things. So then we move on to our language, which is expressive and receptive language. So this refers to how we process what we hear and what we do with that information. Receptive language is our brain's ability to add meaning to what is being said. And this includes things like answering questions, following instructions, learning about vocabulary and grammar. And you can see how broad-based that would be and how that would carry over developmentally from year to year, grade to grade. Expressive language is what happens when we respond verbally or in writing to what we have learned, or we make a comment, or we can express ourselves. This includes forming words into complete thoughts and full sentences. That is my huge, that's my, like, every single day, when a student gives me a one-word answer, I'm like, can you add more to that? One of the big challenges that we have with our technology today is the bite sound sort of way our children have learned to communicate. And that really impacts their thinking, their whole world thinking, that impacts the way they understand concepts, that impacts the way that they express themselves in writing. So never let your kids get away with 2 words when they can help you understand something in a full sentence. So this is also inclusive of what we call pragmatic language. So sometimes you'll see our SEL team, our speech language pathologists, they work a lot about how do kids pick up on the social cues around them, and then how do they express those in their own words? How do they express themselves? How do they maintain an understanding of what's going on around them? And we find that students don't have the vocabulary to do that. So we give them those vocabulary words. We do role playing, and we work on scenarios that they might find that they're facing in everyday life, and that's what we call pragmatic language. So that's also part of the expressive part of the language piece for a speech language pathologist.
Hi, they gave me a microphone. This is great. I can go on for hours about speech and language. They were calling me Dr. Glacken. You all know me as Mrs. Ursula. So if I was unfamiliar to anybody, that's who I am. Okay, so we had the medical clinical model versus the educational model. We come up with this a lot. So the medical clinical model, that's the private speech therapy. So it's often driven by a medical diagnosis. But it's also, we have students going out for speech language therapy, right, for early intervention. Our educational model, it's designed to support the academics in the classroom. So we know that speech and language skills are a critical part of learning. Oral language is a foundation for literacy skills, so we are very concerned about that. But again, it has to adversely affect them in the classroom. So sometimes we get, well, there's that little slight sound that's off. If it's not impacting them in the classroom, we're not going to pull them out. We may do something different, which is the MTSS tiers. You can skip it now. So we also use this model, which is fantastic. The link you see is our articulation and action program. I've been doing this for quite a long time now, and it's been really successful because on Tier 1, it allows me to go into the classroom. I go into the classroom, started years ago in the kindergarten doing phonological awareness groups, but now our interventionists do it with Hegarty, which is fantastic. So what I do now is I go into the preschool, so that we could bridge that gap into the kindergarten. So we do preschool phonological awareness classes. So everybody benefits from it. I also do, especially in the beginning of the year, in kindergarten, I do classroom groups such as volume control. And we'll read a book called Decibella, which will result in maybe visuals. And I don't know if anybody heard like mouse, talk like a mouse, or we're monkey in the middle. Do not talk like a lion. That comes from speech. So that's something that we contribute to the classroom. And the kids love it because everybody's involved and we don't get, is it my turn? Because everybody kind of wants to leave for speech. And they're the good kinds, the smelly ones. So Tier 2 may look a little different. A teacher may say, hey, you know what, I've noticed they're really taking that sound and they're carrying it over into other things, or I'm having a hard time understanding them. Okay, so I'll go in, maybe I'll listen, I'll pull them to the small group in the back, or I'll work with them during ELA. Even kids that have pronoun reversals earlier on, and they'll say, her did it. So I'll go in, I'll model, I'll do some other little things with them in the classroom. If we see that's not working and we need to up it a little bit, we'll go to Tier 3 and maybe they'll come out. Sometimes they need that, especially to learn sounds. So we do this with articulation, fluency, which is stuttering. We do a lot of Tier 3 too, so pulling out. And then this way, if we do need any more services, if it's really, we need, Spencer just left. If we need more services, we would refer. We would talk to the child study team. And we all do work so collaboratively. It's fantastic. But speech and language does impact a lot of different areas, especially reading and writing. And that's something that we really work together with the teachers. I don't know who's next. Doree Leitner.
Oh, sorry. So hi, I'm the behaviorist. I work in the district. I work across all grades. So you'll see me. I'm in the pre-K all the way up to the 8th grade. And I like to use the analogy of a sports team in terms of how I provide my services, as in a tiered level. So at a tier 1, we'd be the coach of the team. We're providing all general drills. All athletes are getting those running drills, their dribbling drills, things like that. In a tier 1 for the students, that's the district-wide programs. Maybe for some of your parents in Dean Porter, the DP Pride tickets, that these kids are earning for good behavior and being recognized in the classroom. That would be a class-wide token economy where the class is earning marbles in a jar to earn an opportunity to wear pajamas on Friday or see a movie at the end of the month. These are behavior strategies that we're implementing on a whole group level, universal design, to just get the students understanding what's expected behaviors in the classroom, good social skills, things like that. I will work with the staff to help them develop some of these in the individualized classrooms or even with the district themselves to help them with programs. And then also conducting professional development programs with the staff in educating them on the acting out, stages of acting out, and what interventions they could use in order to de-escalate any things that may come up. So sometimes, students go through these stages of being agitated and then going into maybe a full-blown tantrum. I'll work with the staff to develop an understanding of what strategies they can implement at each stage so that hopefully we wouldn't get to any type of a full-blown meltdown. At a tier 2 support, then we're talking more like going back to that sports analogy. If you have a soccer team and some kids are weak in their dribbling skills, then we may be pulling small groups. You'd hire that dribbling coach or the batting coach to take a bunch of kids to the side and provide them that extra batting practice as a group, as a whole group, or send them off to run some extra dribbling drills. Sorry. So for that, in the behavioral world, that would look something like implementing some small social groups, some self-regulation strategies, providing staff, doing classroom observations and providing staff in the classroom with whole group interventions or small group interventions, maybe some visual schedules on a few children's desks, or blurting out cards if we have some students who have trouble raising their hands, maybe helping them with some motivation to not, use a blurting card. They are allowed to have 4 cards, and if they go beyond that, and if they don't use all 4 cards, they get a little token at the end of the day, but that would be more of a small group intervention. And then working again with the teachers to develop some of these strategies. When you get to tier 3, that is when I may be targeting more individually students, doing an FBA where some of the behaviors have become more prevalent in the classroom for one student or another. We will determine, an FBA is a functional behavioral assessment. That is something that helps determine what the function of this child's behavior is. Behavior is a form of communication. So why are they acting out like this? What are they communicating to us? What do they need? What are they trying to do? Escape work because maybe it's hard, or get some attention because they want some peer attention. And then with that, we'll develop, if necessary, a behavior plan that would help us to develop strategies to give them what they need in a more appropriate way and hopefully reduce the need for them to act out or engage in a problem behavior. I would provide direct staff training. So typically if a behavior plan is warranted, I then will train the staff on the behavior plan and then do classroom observations, coaching the staff and tweaking the interventions, because sometimes it sounds great when you sit down, and then when you see it in the classroom, you may need to tweak it, and we'll use data to tell us that. So another big part of my job, especially at tier 3, is that data analysis, collecting the data and looking at the data to determine if what we've put in place is working or if we need to tweak things. One of the biggest things about this whole multiple tier system of support is that that framework is the collaboration and preemptive programs that we put in place. So that strong network of collaboration really helps us to catch these kiddos, provide the universal supports, and then along the way help support these kids. And that collaboration is with the classroom, with the teachers, with the outside, with you as parents, and then with the outside also, a lot of times, especially when we get to tier 3, working with outside providers, you know, outside BCBAs, outside therapists. But as they've mentioned before on some of the previous slides, we do come together as a team. I'm working with these guys all the time. I meet with everybody probably on a weekly basis, sometimes a daily basis. And it's really that network, that collaboration that keeps this network here so strong, that MTS network so strong that supports these kids. OT is the next person who would be speaking. I don't know who is running Stephanie, but Stephanie Valdione and I also, and is a strong part of that team. So unfortunately, she's not here.
That's okay. Thankfully, Ursula set the stage for having a conversation about OT and PT in a school. It differs from the medical and clinical setting in that in order to receive OT services at a tier 3 level, you need to ensure that it's greatly impacting your education. So with that being said, there's so much that our OT and PT provide to our teachers in regards to environmental designs for all students to access under the MTSS umbrella. Some of those are things like flexible seating. In IEPs, probably 5 to 6 years ago, it would be written in there that a student needed a standing desk. And on the first day of school, I would be running around with standing desks, stealing them from rooms that didn't need them and putting them in other rooms that did, based upon IEPs and 504s. That is no longer, thanks to the fundraising that you as parents do with the Rumson Education Foundation and the PTO. We have provided those for all the middle school students. So we have those in place as flexible seating. With that, we also have adaptive seating in our grades K through 5. If you go into the classroom, it does not look like a traditional classroom anymore. There are wobble chairs. There are what look like the bed risers that we used in college to store more things on some chairs that allow students to rock back and forth without hurting themselves. There are what look like beach chairs for the carpets so that they can have back support in the event that they need that while they're sitting in a morning meeting or a small group. All of these different adaptive furniture pieces are provided to our students by our OT and PT right within the classroom without needing any sort of pull-out or one-on-one services. Additionally, we have throughout the building motor labs. If you see a student at the end of a hallway doing push-ups, or throwing a tennis ball at the wall, they are visiting the movement lab or the motor lab. Steph Valdinon has set those up throughout the building at all grade levels. We also have sensory paths outside for students who need fresh air and directed movement breaks. Certain students have what we call a free pass or a motor card in their binders that they can pull out to give the teacher a nonverbal cue that they are ready to go take a movement break. This is, again, beyond what we're doing in brain breaks in the classroom setting. Moving beyond Tier 1 and whole group, Steph also pushes in with our pre-K to help our teachers assist with handwriting without tears. And then carrying forward, she helps push into our elementary classes with foundations. At Tier 2, Steph is working with identified students for small group pullout. And then Tier 3, our students who need the most support in the school setting would be working with her in a one-on-one setting. So that's a bit about occupational therapy.